I think the one thing to keep in mind is you want to be clear on what that message is, though. Going in with a lot of clarity with what you're going to be saying. I've seen it backfire where people don't know what they're going to be talking about, or I've seen this in networking meetings a number of times, and people would say, "Well, I didn't prepare today, so I'm just going to wing it and hope for the best." Well, how'd that do you in school? Same thing in the business world. Whether you're podcasting or whether you're speaking in front of a group of people on the stage or in front of a small networking group, you really need to know what your core message is and what the goal of that. In the podcasting world, it's what's the goal of the podcast in general, but what's the goal of the episode? Where do you want to go with it? What overlying message are you imparting to the audience? And not what's their takeaway, but what's their call to action? What do you want them to do with that information? So you really need to be clear on all of that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. Chuck Anderson here, and I've got another amazing guest for you. And for those of you who are speakers or have a message to share, maybe you do some podcasting, maybe you don't, but if you find yourself compelled to speak, if you like that, you're going to love today's guest. I am joined with Carl Richards today, and we're going to be talking about business success. We're going to be talking about speaking and podcasting and broadcasting and whatever else we feel like talking about today. Carl, welcome to the program.
Chuck, it's a pleasure to be here. Sounds like we're going to run the gamut on this. We're going to talk about everything.
Well, at least for 30 seconds per topic, because with the limited time that we have. But hey, we'll go where it goes, and maybe there will be a part two. Who knows? So Carl, I do not like to butcher people's introductions. Okay, so nobody's going to tell your story better than you. So I'm going to get you to do your own introduction, introduce yourself to our audience, who you are, what you do, and that will be our starting point for today.
Yeah, sure. Chuck, thanks so much. My name is Carl Richards, of course. I spent 25 years in radio broadcasting and, town to town, up and down the dial, just like, those of you who remember WKRP in Cincinnati. It's a reality. That's literally how I spent my career. And at some point, I took the step into doing speaker training between radio gigs. It's something that I loved. I certainly loved speaking, still do. I thank Toastmasters for that, but somewhere along the line, also found that I also fell in love with podcasting after not even knowing what one was back not so many years ago, to not only falling in love with podcasting, but when the world changed in 2020, found myself looking to help people rather than get on physical stages because we weren't allowed to, get on virtual stages. And a podcast was just a natural fit because at the end of the day, a podcast is another speaking opportunity. So what I do is I help coaches, consultants, and other subject matter experts who are, they're frazzled and they just don't think they have the time or the technical knowledge or skill to be able to create a podcast, launch one, and maintain it so they can be seen as the subject matter expert.
Well, fantastic. And I think that's a great lead into all of the directions that we plan to go with this thing today. And that's one thing that our audience all have in common. I mean, so many of them, big mission entrepreneurs who have a message, they have something to share. Yeah. They have an opinion on how things should be. They have advice on how we should do it or might make life easier for us. I'm one of those people. That's how I got into this. I am not a radio person, although I've always admired radio people, especially just that incredible voice control. And one of the things modeling radio people, because it's like, you can't stop talking. Like when you're on air, right? You're the product. You're the product. And so like, and that was and modeling what you guys do has been helpful because when I do webinars, I do a Q&A webinar every week where it's only one way. People type in their questions and it's just me, right? So how do you just talk and keep that conversation going when it's only you?
Yeah, it's, it's a very interesting question. And there's a reason why there's a cough button in the studio, because when you do have to clear your throat or cough or take a quick sip of water, it's good to know you have that couple of, second or two to do that. But how you keep talking is you always know where you're going with your content. I had a program director back when I was about 5 or 6 years into the business, said, you don't have to tell the audience everything. And he said, really, it's one thought or one idea per break. So each time you're opening the mic and talking, you don't need to tell everyone your life story and give all the information. One thing. And if you can say that one thing in 30 seconds to a minute, unless you're a talk show host, and that's a totally different type of broadcasting altogether. But if you're just talking between songs, or if you're talking at the end of a song break and going into a commercial, audience doesn't want to hear you go on for 4 or 5 minutes. And if you do, it better be something that's earth-shatteringly phenomenal that you have to tell the whole story, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes less is better. That's the bigger issue. Sometimes less is better. And keep in mind, if you are doing a talk show format, or in this case, a podcast, that you know that your audience is probably going to need to get a refresh, or some type of their attention span is going to need something that's going to distract them every 3 to 5 minutes. Not with a thought changer or a topic changer, but something that's slightly different. Maybe it goes from guest to host or host to guest or whatever, but something that just really shifts that. But how do you keep talking? It's practice. To be quite honest, it's a lot of practice.
Well, I think, I love what you shared there about the one thing. And I think it's so important with podcasting. It's not about filling 20 or 30 minutes full of audio content of what the heck did you just talk about? And I listen to some A-listers who do podcasts, and I'm like, what are you guys even talking about? I have no idea. And I always talk to my team about having when we're publishing the episodes, like, what was the theme of that show? And if we can't figure that out, like, okay, maybe we need to work on that a little bit. But having that theme, having something to say, but not a million things to say.
Yeah, just one central theme. Now, that central theme might have 3 subsections that you're going to cover, especially if you're doing a longer form show. I mean, there are some podcasters that like longer form content. I still think a sweet spot is about 30 minutes, but even 30 minutes gets a little bit long if you're not staying on one central theme, right? So, but if you stay on that one central theme, even if you had subcategories, you can cover a lot with that one central theme. And those subheadings, they just support that one thing you're talking about. And again, this is a trick I learned too when I was learning how to stand on stages and speak. And the big thing is, I mean, the messages, the difference between a 10-minute talk and a 1 hour long keynote, for example, you know what the difference is? The amount of stories and just the amount of content, not the amount of, additional content, as in how many topics can we throw in. It's just how many more stories or how many more examples can we give that support the overlying theme. That's really the only difference.
And staying connected with that theme, right? And really tying it in. And I think we do a reasonably good job of that show, although I am known to go off on tangents from time to time, but we do bring it back at some point or another. And I think, so 2 things in terms of a theme of our episode, Carl, is one is, we do talk about partnership and collaboration, and we want to get to that here in a moment. But I think the sub theme of our audience has a message to share. They have an idea. And speaking and podcasts, whether it be on stages or on podcasts or whatever, is a great way to get that message out there, or even just become known for the thing that they do. So has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great platform and a great way to do that. I think the one thing to keep in mind is you want to be clear on what that message is, though. Going in with a lot of clarity with what you're going to be saying. I've seen it backfire where people don't know what they're going to be talking about, or I've seen this in networking meetings a number of times, and people would say, "Well, I didn't prepare today, so I'm just going to wing it and hope for the best." Well, how'd that do you in school? Same thing in the business world. Whether you're podcasting or whether you're speaking in front of a group of people on the stage or in front of a small networking group, you really need to know what your core message is and what the goal of that. In the podcasting world, it's what's the goal of the podcast in general, but what's the goal of the episode? Where do you want to go with it? What overlying message are you imparting to the audience? And not what's their takeaway, but what's their call to action? What do you want them to do with that information? So you really need to be clear on all of that.
Absolutely. And, what we want people to do is be inspired and, to be bigger and bolder in their business. Speaking and podcasting is part of that. Partnership and collaborations is another part of that. And so
that's huge.
So I have to ask you, how has partnerships and collaborations played a role in your business?
Oh my goodness, it's played a huge role. It started out with collaborating with a marketing expert who's been a coach of mine for several years. We've done a number of different collaborations together, from me emceeing her events to her emceeing some of my events, to we've been on each other's podcasts now and collaborating, marketing messages and speaking messages. But most recent collaboration that has really supported myself and another individual is I've partnered with and collaborated with somebody who is a creative writing expert. And what she does is she helps people get published. She helps people get books out there. Well, you know what? The same path to writing a book and launching a podcast and maintaining a podcast, they're essentially the same. And we've figured out that the reasons why people don't launch podcasts and why they don't launch books, they're almost the exact same reasons. So that's been an amazing collaboration, and it feels like we're just getting started, even though we've been doing this now for 6 months, or it seems like almost a year. And the more we dive into it, the more we can see clients and prospects who are starting to see it all come to fruition for themselves. But that partnership has been amazing.
It's such a big part, and nobody really accomplishes anything alone. And, I came from people who, on the farm, a farm boy here, where I used to hear the phrase all the time, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And, that in my first couple of years of entrepreneurship, I tried, man. Like, I was working 14, 16 hours a day. I was sleeping under my desk. Yeah. And you know what? Nobody really accomplishes anything alone, because what got me out of that? Asking for help and also partnering with somebody and that was a game changer.
It's true. You hit the nail on the head. When I started Podcast Solutions Made Simple, I thought, I could do this by myself. How many podcasts can I produce in a month? I should be able to do 6 to 10. I quickly hired a producer to assist in that process. And then I hired a junior producer to assist in that process, and also hired 2 VAs. One that can do all the social media stuff that I just don't want to do it. But then on top of that, somebody that can do the other side of virtual assistant and that VA work, and that's helping with the artwork side of things and other things that I'm doing on my business as opposed to in my business. So having that support staff, I don't know where I'd be without it. I wouldn't be sleeping. I know that.
Yeah. Been there, done that, have the t-shirt for sure. When you identify something in your business that maybe shouldn't be done by you, or you just don't have the capacity to do, and you want to go out and look for either a recommendation or someone or something that can help you, what's your go-to method for finding what you need?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first thing I do is I ask people who I already know, like, and trust. I say, do you know anyone who, or do you know a good VA, for example? And I actually knew a couple of VAs, and I asked my coach, I said, just out of curiosity, is your VA looking for more work? And at the time, this individual wasn't. She was already booked solid, but ironically enough, 6 months after, her calendar opened up, and I'm like, that's mine, because I need that help. But I ask people who I know. Now, sometimes I'll get a little bold and I'll do the Facebook thing that says, who knows a good VA? Put your comments in there. I know I'm going to get a lot of things that I'm going to have to weed through. But again, I look for the people who I know. And if I can reach out to them, if I know they're already using someone, if they already have somebody rather on their team, I'll ask them. I'll say, who's helping you with your website? Who's helping you with your social media posts? The podcast production piece has been an interesting one. Having a background in radio has been very helpful, because I've been able to tap into people who I know. But I also know that there are a lot of either underemployed or unemployed broadcasters out there who are always looking for that next opportunity. And, podcasting and broadcasting, the two go very hand in hand. So a lot of the work that we do at the agency here is not too dissimilar to what I did in radio. So, knowing those go-to places and not being afraid to stretch beyond and not being afraid to ask for help, I think is the big one, though.
Absolutely. And I love that. That's what I do as well, is I reach out to my network. And I think, one of the side benefits of doing this show is I get to increase my connections. You and I are now connected, and I can already tell that I want to talk to you again after all of this. So it's already been amazing. But yeah, and so having that network that you can put those requests out to and say, hey, does anybody know anything or anyone who can do this? So powerful. And then being bold enough to ask and receive, right? Absolutely.
The other thing I will do is I'll just, not so much Facebook these days, but I'll go combing through my LinkedIn account and see, I got over 3,000 or 4,000 LinkedIn connections. So who do I know in a certain space? So I'll do a search that way too, just to see who I already know, because there's maybe there might be gold out there that I've forgotten about, because who knows, or who keeps track of 4,000 connections, right? I certainly don't. So it's good to go back and look at those connections and say, oh, they're perfect for this opportunity, or I wonder if they know someone who can help me. So I quite often find myself going that route too, but you definitely need to, not be afraid to say, I'm looking for help in this area. Do you know anyone? It's a good way to do it.
Absolutely. And I really hope that inspires our audience to, put it out there and look for places for help where maybe you're struggling in your business, and maybe someone could come in and just clean that all up for you. You just never know. It's been a game changer for us. And I love, Carl, how you shared, your stories about that as well. Entrepreneurship is a journey, and it's one about business growth, but it's also one about self-growth. And so one of the things I always like to ask my guests while I have them here is a little bit about that. So in that idea of growth, who's been the leader, the thought leader or mentor or whoever that has really inspired you and that you've learned a lot from in your journey?
Oh my goodness. There have been several along the way, but I think the one that comes to mind immediately is a woman I met back in 2016. Her name is Diana Lidstone. And I'll tell you, Diana has not only been inspirational, but she's kicked my butt several times to, build my business. She's been the coach in the corner that says, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. So hats off to Diana, because if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would be as far along in my business as I am today. And her encouragement to just keep going, even when things seem hopeless, like it's never going to work out. She's always like, no, keep going. You're doing the right thing. So definitely Diana Lidstone for sure.
We all need someone who can kick us in the butt once in a while. Oh, yeah. And I definitely have those people in my life as well. So I so relate to that. So amazing recommendation. I've heard a lot about Diana, but I've never met her. Yeah. And but I've heard good things for sure. We'll make sure that we connect the dots and put her links in the show notes here as well. And then, another thing I want to ask, Carl, is about books. I mean, there's so many great books, a lot of wisdom written in these books, and they've been certainly helpful for me. I personally love audiobooks because I consume audiobooks easier than I can read them, but same content, different package. What is that book that you would recommend that all of our listeners read or listen to?
You know what? I knew you were going to ask me this. I was racking my brain as we were getting to that. And it would have to be Return on Influence. And it's by Susan Luke Evans. Return on Influence, the New Currency for Leaders. It's a fantastic read. Susan is no slouch when it comes to the speaking for years. As a matter of fact, her late husband, I believe, Warren, if I'm not mistaken, was the first president of the Global Speakers Federation. And I'll tell you something, she's a phenomenal thought leader. She's a really great storyteller too, but definitely Return on Influence has been a huge game changer for me in the book world. Yeah.
Wow, great recommendation. I have not read that book, but I'm going to add that to the must-read list, and I will definitely be checking that out. So I appreciate you recommending that. Carl, I had got the sense that we could talk all day because there's so many more questions I want to ask you, but I know nobody wants to listen to a 2-hour podcast episode, but maybe we'll do a podcast series.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, let's take a coffee break, come back and do some more recording. But yeah, this has been great. Thanks so much, Chuck, for inviting me on here.
So one of the things I want to leave people with, and I hope they're inspired to, start putting their message out there. And a podcast is a great way to do that. Yeah. So Carl, tell everyone how they can get a hold of you, how they can connect with you and your business, and how you can help them.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way currently at the recording of this podcast is Carlspeaks.ca. My calendar link is there. Ask Carl at Carlspeaks.ca if you want to link directly to me that way. We're doing a lot of rebranding, focusing, of course, on the podcasting. So that's coming in the future, but that's the best way too. And on social media, Chuck, I know we're going to connect on social media after today. LinkedIn is where I hang out a lot. Facebook, Instagram as well. I'd love to connect with you there too.
Well, LinkedIn's definitely my thing, and not so much with the email, but I love LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's been really, really powerful. So we're definitely going to connect there and all the other places too. I mean, why not? They're there. So let's do it. So Carl, thank you so much. And I do highly recommend that if you're still listening in, do connect with Carl. And all of his links and pertinent information here are in the show notes beneath the video, are in the podcast episode show notes. Carl, thank you so much for being on the show. If you're going to leave our audience with just one final piece of wisdom or advice, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I'm going to actually tell you how I end my podcast, because I think it's a very powerful piece. And it's get out there, whether it be on a physical stage or a podcast stage, and own that space, own the platform.
Well said. Own the platform, get your message out there. So Carl, thank you so much for what you do, because I think it's important to get this message out there, and for being my special guest on this episode today. And for our listeners, thank you so much for joining in. And we want you to go out there and keep moving forward and be awesome in your pursuit of your dreams and your business and that world-changing idea that you have. We all desperately need it. Thank you so much. And we'll see you here for the next one.